Hi, I'm Eve Palatine.
And I'm Carmenta Seriano. We are the Glib Girls.
Welcome to the Global Girls Talk Show.
Today's topic is a continuation of our discussion about lifelong learning with emphasis on creativity.
Hey, Carmenta, hang on. I love this location you found for us in Second Life today, by the way.
Yeah, this is the Castle of Fae Arctic Wolf.
Wow, I hope everyone's enjoying our avatars walking around these beautiful virtual sims in Second Life while we're having these engaging conversations. Anyway, I was thinking about our last show, actually, Carmenta. And to start with, I really wanted to give a general definition of creativity, but that's really hard. I looked around, I found that I wasn't exactly happy with so-called definitions. I went and searched the databases for journal articles at USC Online Library, and I found a couple of definitions I thought were appropriate, sort of, for education. And firstly, I have McKinnon, who defined creativity as, quote, a process extended in time and characterized by originality, adaptiveness, and realization. And I thought that was pretty good. And then I found another one that said, I think this one was by Vernon. Creativity is a person's ability to generate ideas, inventions, artistic objects, insights, and products that are judged by experts as being of high value. So both of these definitions seemed diverse to me, and that was all I was looking for. They might not be perfect, but they kind of got in the ballpark. But like you said, it's a difficult thing to define.
Yeah, I'm sure if you asked 100 different highly creative people what creativity is, you'd get 100 different answers. As educators, we both want to be creative and foster creativity among our students. We have to decide what we mean by that and what it looks like exactly. Otherwise, how do you know if you've succeeded? When you compare the term creativity with a description of higher level thinking and 21st century skills, there are a lot of similarities. For example, if you look at Bloom's taxonomy, the revised version, higher level thinking skills include the ability to create a new product. In other words, taking materials and designing and constructing something new. This type of learning, or thinking rather, is at the top of Bloom's list. And if you look at 21st century skills, creativity, imagination, critical thinking, problem solving, flexibility, and adaptability are key. And surely these are qualities that can be fostered in each of us. There isn't an end to it either. Fostering these qualities is a lifelong process, as you and I both know.
Yes.
In 2008, Daniel H. Pink described this kind of creative thinking in his book, A Whole New Mind. He suggested that we've moved into a new time period in our history. We've had the Industrial Revolution, we've gone through the Information Age, and he considers what we're in now to be a conceptual age where creative thinking, which he called right brain thinking, is most in demand. Certainly, creativity involves using critical thinking skills, and it results in the ability to produce something new. Of all the things any learner needs to develop, I think the ability to use critical thinking skills is right up there at the top of the list.
Definitely and for sure. You know, you're so right, first of all. And after our last episode we recorded, I was really thinking critically about creativity and how people often call others right-brained or left-brained. So I thought I'd review what I learned some years ago about how this thinking kind of got started and actually was refuted too as well, but we still use it. This Dr. Roger Sperry, he was a Nobel laureate, and he was the man who discovered the differences in function between the right and left brain hemispheres. And apparently some media spin was put on his research, which resulted in people propagating a sort of myth about left and right brain people. And also, not exactly is it anatomically correct, but even though, I should note that we informally talk about right and left brainedness, and it seems to fit many people. Anyway, let me try to briefly explain what Eric Jensen's book, Brain-Based Learning from 2008, said about this. And his explanation was a bit different, probably a little bit more academic. But you and I both read this book, so I thought it was fun to add some credence there too. But firstly, some people are of the belief that so-called left-brain people means that they're focused on tasks, verbal, analytical, and logical. And then for the so-called right-brained people, they are believed to be creative, fun, expressive, artsy, and eccentric. Again, these are kind of like true myths, which were brought about by layman's interpretations of Roger Sperry's brain research. And it's not that it's wrong, but it's just that maybe he said it a little differently. Anyway, on the other hand, instead of being right-brained, left-brained, Dr. Jensen discusses in his book the fact that we're all whole-brained, which is true. We're using the left side and right side probably at the same time. He says that meaning the left side processes parts and language sequentially, and the right side processes wholes and spatial information randomly. And interestingly enough, I also read another article on this subject, which essentially says, and I'm paraphrasing here, left-brained is the new right-brained.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's kind of like orange is the new black sort of thing. You hear that all the time. Anyway.
I get that. I seriously loved Jensen's book, too. I'm really in for balance, no matter what you do, whether you're talking learning styles or right and left brain. Really, the goal is to be well balanced. I think it's important to recognize that we have two ways of speaking about this. We do the right brain, left brain thing, and of course we use our whole brain. But people have been using right brain and left brain kind of like a shorthand, and just to kind of get into the conversation and get to the point of what they want to say about people.
Right.
Just like Gardner said that we have preferred learning styles. So really, I think balance. Balance is really the end goal. And if you happen to be, quote unquote, more right-brained or left-brained, you still want to develop abilities on both sides. Pink, in his book, shared the background story of Sperry's research, and he did discuss misconceptions that people have had and currently have. But the bottom line from his book was that creativity is at a premium in the 21st century, and being right-brained or creative, being able to be an idea person, that's become the shorthand. Right brain has become the shorthand for being creative.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm so used to hearing this too, and it makes a lot of sense actually. And I'm really, really interested in creativity as it relates to the intrinsic-extrinsic motivation, which is a really hot button topic for educators of foreign languages here in Istanbul and all over the world and all over Turkey, for that matter. A lot of research is being conducted about this topic, and it's fraught with all sorts of implications. One researcher, Amabilia, 1983, it's an old article, but he maintained that individuals have certain traits or abilities that are conducive to creativity. But he poses the question as to whether or not these individuals will be creative depending on intrinsic motivation, which of course is the motivation to do something or create something just for the sake of doing it, just because they like it or it makes them happy. That kind of reminds me of me. But yeah, that's my favorite kind of motivation, of course. And then furthermore, extrinsic motivation is the motivation to do something for a particular effect or reward. And that has found to have a positive effect on creativity in some people. In other words, some people might need some sort of, some impetus to make them create, which it sounds kind of weird. You don't want to. You want creativity to be really natural, but some people need some kind of reward, and I'm getting to that. I think I sort of have my answer about the correlation between creativity and motivation. And I did study motivation quite a lot through the lens of self-efficacy and interest for my doctoral dissertation. But I always wanted to study the creativity angle about this because it's so profoundly related. And I'll just got one more comment about this. Prabhu and Sutton, 2008, it's a bit more current, said the relationship between self-efficacy, openness to experience, and perseverance affect creativity and motivation.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. When I was working on my master's in reading, I also explored the whole idea of motivation. And that's kind of a slippery thing. When a teacher is dealing with a classroom full of students, it's pretty hard to pin down because motivation is best when it's intrinsic. But if a student feels like they're being manipulated from the outside, they may resist and maybe even refuse to participate. In fact, if a student who is intrinsically motivated encounters a learning situation where some sort of extrinsic motivation, like a reward, is being offered, they might actually lose interest and lose their motivation to participate. And what motivates one person may have the opposite effect on another person. Really, the ideal is for the learner to be intrinsically motivated. So what environment or experience do you need to create to foster self-motivated learners? I explored that again when we did our action research projects for the masters each of us earned in education media design technology. And in that case, I was looking to see if involving students in creative experiences would increase their motivation to learn. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, though, isn't it? I mean, do we create because we're intrinsically motivated to do so? Or is it okay to be extrinsically motivated to create, use a reward to get people to create? Giving kids a grade, or at work you get a promotion. Is there even really a right or wrong to that? I mean, if you've got people involved in the creative process, isn't there value in simply having participated in creating?
Definitely.
I worked with an alternative high school, well, actually a lot of them. I worked with alternative high school students who, for whatever reason, struggled with traditional teaching approach. And it wasn't so much a matter of whether they were best motivated intrinsically or intrinsically. It was a matter of getting them to participate to the point where they gained the skills or knowledge that they needed. Actually, the gamified online learning experience that my colleague and I are creating is really in response to this question of motivating and fostering creativity. And perhaps we need to distinguish, too, between adult learners and children. In general, adult learners are self-motivated, while children are learning things that a teacher or parent thinks they should know. Adults learn things in order to serve their own purposes. It's andragogy versus pedagogy. That conversation could take another whole episode, too. But in 2007, a gentleman named Stephen Pugh, who is an associate professor at Park University, examined this issue of teachers using methods and practices best suited to children with adult learners and vice versa. And he suggested that this mismatch could result in what he called situational, temporary, or unsustainable models of motivation that guide lifelong learners and perhaps undermine the entire process of student motivation. I kind of like to think adults would be better open and able to experience new things and be able to persevere, although that's not always true. Often our creative spirits have been stifled long before we even left elementary school. And perhaps instead of visiting the writings of scientists and educators, we ought to borrow a few ideas from places like Creativity Inc., this book that you've been reading, and I've been looking at it too, by Ed Catmull. They're really talking about how to take creative people and get the most out of them, really how to motivate them to really be the most creative and most productive. Of course, Catmull is talking about work and motivating people who are creative rather than defining what creativity is. But I don't think it's ever too late for most people to start cultivating their own creativity.
Oh, you brought up such a huge plethora of information for us to get our teeth into here, actually, on this subject. And so much of it rings true to even what I'm going through in my own learning experience for myself and in my teaching experience and the learning that my students are doing. Because sadly, what I found that inspires the creativity of my EFL students is extrinsic motivation in the form of how good of a grade they're going to get if they are more creative in their writing or in the sentences they make and things like that. And it isn't what I try to inspire in them, but the idea of a higher grade seems to get them moving more than their own internal creativity, inspirations, or aspirations that they have. So with these different readings that we're talking about and diverse ideas in mind, I'd like to briefly explore the question then, how do we define our own creative processes? And the reason I'm bringing that up is that I think that creativity in teaching, creativity in ourselves, in our own learning, and how do we teach creativity, or how do we teach learning to the students? Because what I'm finding is that students don't really know how to learn. They're looking to us to kind of show them the path. But once we are looking at our own learning processes as teachers who've been in the business a long time and doing this, we are looking at our own learning processes, and we're figuring out that we probably learn differently than we ever thought we did, which is an abstract. It really is, but I'll try to explain it better. And obviously, you and I both have quite a good amount of creativity between us, as evidence as how we managed to, problem solve creativity during our master's in technology classes, and how we motivate others we teach to be creative. Why don't we take a minute and just describe our own creative processes and attempt to briefly explain how we are motivated to create, and also how we might motivate others. You can go first on that one.
Okay. I think experience and being willing to learn new things and take risks with learning are important. Curiosity is certainly a great quality to have if you want to develop your own personal creativity, and allowing yourself to explore and try out a lot of different things can pique your interest and your curiosity and lead you to delve into things that you might not have considered learning about. Interacting with other people is important too. Just as you can develop good or bad habits through repetition, I think people can develop their creativity and their love of learning by making a conscious effort to do so. Just as one success leads to another, the more I learn, the more I want to know. Why, after more than 5 decades of living, am I sitting in classes with 20-somethings learning how to make films and use Adobe software? Because I want to know. After all these years of pursuing knowledge, stopping now is just unthinkable, and I think the same is true for being creative. If someone were to ask me how to become more creative, I'd advise them to start with a little introspection, identifying their own personal qualities first. Know thyself, as Socrates would say. Finding other people to be creative with is also important. You know that. You're always networking with other people, and you've been describing some things you've been doing lately that are really cool, but you're getting together with other people to do them. For example, you and I are creating this YouTube talk show. Certainly the two of us sharing ideas is much more dynamic than either of us alone would be. And the things we create will be exponentially better because it's not just an additive result, but a multiplicative result when people combine their efforts.
True.
Another example of this is the online coursework my friend and I are designing. We're looking to break the usual mold for high school online learning, and I can tell you I had to work with some pretty awful programs when I was teaching. I don't know why schools opt for canned, dry, poorly designed programs instead of drawing on the creative resources of their own staff. Maybe money has something to do with it, but the point is that creativity flourishes when you team up with other people. So I'd encourage people to first become more self-aware and then make a conscious effort to seek new learning experiences and people to share them with. And I might mention, too, when I talk about experience, one of the things I'm good at is coming up with ideas, taking materials around me and making something new. But I've been doing that since I was a kid. I don't think I have any special talent, but I have lots of opportunities to do creative things since I was little. And through years of experience, I've come to a point where people think I'm creative. To me, it's just problem solving. The more opportunities a person takes to do creative things, the more their own personal level of creativity will rise, especially if they do them with other people, and it becomes an enjoyable habit.
Oh, you're so right. And that speaks also to the socio-cultural aspects of learning and teaching, which I've been looking at a lot lately too, and it's another area for us to go into and delve into. Actually, Carmenta, you are incredibly creative. I love watching the video stories that you write, the storytelling you do using video. You do all of the speaking or most of the speaking and acting parts, design the costumes and the special effects and assets, etc. And they're hilarious, actually. I've really enjoyed watching you learn about a lot in your fine craft of video production. It must have been a really fun class, and I thought you just did extremely well with it.
Yeah, it was fun. It still is fun. Thanks. I appreciate your vote of confidence, and the same can be said for you. In addition to your educational achievements, I know you sing, you play at least 2 instruments, and you're about to learn another. You compose your own music. You've created an electronic children's book, which I still want to see you publish, because I thought it was really cool. And your photography is wonderful. Of course, you do a lot of creative things with your students as well. What motivates you to create? What relationship do you think creativity has with being a lifelong learner?
Well, you mentioned it earlier. You talked about how you've always been a problem solver and really creative doing things and a doer ever since you were a child. And that's how it started with me and my sister, actually. And I told you kind of remind me of her sometimes. And I hope in the future we can talk to her on this venue as well, because we were kids of the 60s, 1960s. We're at home and we didn't watch TV very much, just on the weekends, because we had school nights, and we had to sit around the kitchen table doing our homework. And sometimes she and I would just play act a little bit, and she'd say, make me laugh. And I do all these variety of funny voices and characters for her. And we ended up kind of making our own little talk show, the Carol D. Carol Show. I'm sure I've mentioned it before. And I always loved radio because the radio was always on in that kitchen and around that kitchen table. And I really think that those early experiences with my sister was what helped me, that inspired creativity in me, because I did have then my partner was my sister, and she and I were just equally as creative as the other. And my sister also is a great writer now. She's a really creative writer, way better than what I can do, but we have different skills. And so it's really great to look at how we both have evolved over the years because of what we did in our childhood. And I wasn't even really thinking about the artsy or musical stuff I do or writing projects I've worked on. I mean, there's something I draw inspiration from at times, yes, in order to inspire my students to help them with creative thinking and brainstorming. And lately, I've got to tell you though, since finishing my doctorate and finally getting to go up on the final graduation walk with my fellow students in Los Angeles at USC just over a week ago when I flew to USA, I had a few moments while waiting to go out and claim my diploma cover to reflect. And what hit me was how little time I have had to actually pursue my creative side since I was entrenched in the dissertation process for nearly the last 4 years. So I decided to do 3 things upon my return to Turkey. In fact, one of them I started before I left, and that was last Monday, actually, when I came back. But first, I made a deal with myself to pursue the broadening of my Turkish language study. It's a very difficult language for an English speaker, and it's not anything like the language group that we belong to of Latin-based languages. So I hired a Turkish tutor who coaches me the way I want to learn over Skype once a week. So how I want to learn, it's not from books, it's not from theory. I want to be sort of hands-on. And what I want to do is kind of give myself a way to learn that's interesting and fun, and I get the information I need as well. So that's going really well, I might add. And then next, I brushed the dust off my guitar, and I went with a Turkish guitar playing friend of mine here in Istanbul to the nearest music store. And I bought a few items like some new strings and a soft case to carry my guitar around in. And this is to get myself inspired to practice again, and I've been doing that every day. While I was at the music store, I also noticed that they sold cellos. And I asked the store owner if they teach music lessons there, and he said yes. And what was I interested in? And I told him that I would like to learn cello, and he said, well, it's a hard instrument to learn unless you have experience with like instruments. And I said, well, I've been playing guitar for some time, and I also had taken up violin before, but I had neck and jaw issues, and that sort of precluded me from playing the violin. I just couldn't be in that position all the time. I don't know how people do it really without, causing themselves severe pain. Anyway, he thought it'd be just fine for me to learn cello, and he gave me the name of the cello instructor, and I'm planning to make that call and make an appointment for a lesson.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about your progress. As for me, I'm taking a class to improve my skills in Adobe Illustrator, and I want to create character interfaces for the online courses that I'm designing. And then I want to learn about 2D and 3D animation. I've been fooling around with stop motion animation too, though right now I'm just trying to get my lighting and green screen right. Listening to you makes me think about learning an instrument too. I played an oboe for a bit when I was a kid, but we moved and I didn't continue. I think though I'll stick with learning to create video and animation for now. I write a bit too, and I want to learn how to illustrate my novel. Ha! Put it on the calendar, right? We both have quite the to-do list.
I know, and you know how we've been talking about women of our age group being the older generation, sort of baby boomers. Look, we're still just mad to create, aren't we? I mean, it's just great. I love talking to you about this because I end up getting equally and even more inspired to carry on and do something else, and it just makes for more fodder for us to chew out here on the show. And I'm hoping that the women who are in our age category, and all women and all people actually who listen to our show, men too, I hope they will sort of get a sort of fire under themselves to make something interesting and creative in whatever they're doing, whether it's their job or their hobbies or just something, something interesting. And everything you said, I really understand exactly what you're saying. And when you said you played the oboe for a bit, oh my gosh, I've always heard that was like the most difficult instrument. So you picked a tough one. And I love the idea that you're really interested in animation because this is where everything is going. I mean, every commercial you see practically is animated now. I've been watching. There's not that many live commercials really anymore. Everything's animated. And of course, there's tons of animation used in video games, which are really exciting. And the anime movies are amazing. So I think you're just right up there with the cutting edge. And that's important too, because we got to keep our skills really current. And for me, professionally, of course, I'm mainly focused on how to inspire creativity by inventing new ways to teach even the mundane things that we have to study, like grammar in my English classes and sentence structure. And I did design a fun lesson I call Twitter Tuesday, and which harnesses the power of social media and allows the students to be a bit creative in their sentence writing and their sociocultural activity because they get into groups or pairs. And I ask the students to work in pairs and come up with 6 sentences. I can't say that right. 2 positive, 2 negative, and 2 interrogatory sentences which reflect the lesson's grammar point that day. And after they create the sentences, I choose one from each group that feels that it reflects the grammar correctly and also seems creative in nature and funny, maybe. And I ask the students to vote on the sentences they like the best. And then I tweet the sentences in the rank they were voted in by the students. And they follow me on Twitter, and they usually retweet their sentences. And they really enjoy this because it kind of is putting the old with the new. Oh, let's make some sentences out of grammar points, but then let's tweet them on Twitter. So the students, it makes them really cognizant of the fact that they need good sentence and grammar structure in a concise way that fits into a Twitter tweet. And as far as being a lifelong learner, I have to say that my creativity of approach that I use and to be able to continue to pursue knowledge and also teach my students in the most creative ways I can, I think have helped define my role as a lifelong learner. I say that because I wouldn't have even thought of pursuing extra university degrees and spending all the time I have continuing to learn in order to be a more effective teacher if I hadn't been creative about my own learning process. I simply would not have managed it otherwise, and I had to juggle many things such as work and moving to a foreign country while also studying and writing a dissertation.
Yeah, kudos to you on that, too. I admire your adventurous spirit. I think that in terms of lifelong learning and creativity, it's important to forge your own path. Whether you're getting to another degree or if you're founding a nonprofit organization, writing, traveling, or just following that spirit of learning and creativity in countless other ways. I've been happy to discover lately, barring any unfortunate events, that you and I could easily live into our 90s or even maybe 100. And the same is true of many people who may listen to our talk show now. I hope that we can discuss that in future episodes too. Think about it though. It's like having another lifetime to consider and continue and grow and learn and create. How exciting is that? We aren't finished yet, and not by a long shot. As we develop this talk show and share our thoughts with others, I hope we can pass that excitement to keep learning and being creative on to the people who are viewing and listening. I hope that we're an encouragement to others so that they don't think they have to hang it up at a certain age.
You're absolutely right. And as always, this has been a really exciting talk show. It's got me really thinking. So it was really great talking to you, Carmenta.
You know, I enjoyed talking to you too, Eve.
Thank you. We'll see you next time in Second Life.
Thank you for listening to our Global Girls Talk Show.
Bye.
Bye-bye.